In a major skydiving accident in history, 18 skydivers faced a critical mistake with no chance to turn back once they jumped from the plane. What started as excitement turned to fear for these experienced skydivers. Sadly, 16 of them lost their lives, leaving only 2 survivors who recounted the terrifying tale. This incident is famously known as the Lake Erie disaster, named after the 4th largest lake in North America and the 11th largest globally. The event took place near Otner Airport, situated 13 kilometers south of Lake Erie. On August 27, 1967, 30 skydivers arrived at the airport enticed by the offer of free flights. A B-25 bomber, a modified World War II plane managed by a private company, provided the free flights. However, as the skydivers boarded one by one, the limited space in the bomber became evident. At the last moment, the pilot selected only 20 divers due to weight issues. This selection impacted the divers' experience and skills. The remaining 10 skydivers were disappointed not to be chosen, but they understood that the pilot's decision likely saved their lives. The plan was for the B-25 bomber to ascend to around 20,000 feet, return to Otner Airport, and release the 18 divers mid-air. Welcome back once again to Docutainment's videos. Afterward, the plan was for the remaining 2 divers to jump from a higher altitude of 30,000 feet. All the divers were expected to land back at Otner Airport using their parachutes. Weather conditions delayed the morning flight, but the B-25 bomber eventually took off at 3 p.m. The excitement among the divers was palpable as they were offered free flights and had their first experience jumping from a bomber plane. Following the B-25's takeoff, a small Cessna 180 plane also departed from the same airport. The divers were supposed to catch it at an altitude of 12,000 feet, while the B-25, carrying the other divers, ascended in spirals. Both aircraft pilots relied on communication with the air traffic control tower due to poor weather conditions. Without GPS technology available, they depended on the tower for location updates. An hour into the flight, the B-25 bomber reached an altitude of 20,000 feet. The pilot radioed the control tower for their position since visual cues were hindered by the weather. The control tower informed the B-25 pilot that they were approximately 9 kilometers away from Otner Airport, placing them close to the drop zone. A minute later, the Cessna 180's pilot contacted the air traffic controller to confirm their location relative to the B-25, as the poor weather obstructed their view of the larger aircraft. The controller relayed that the Cessna was 9 kilometers behind the B-25, positioning it 18 kilometers away from Otner Airport. At an altitude of 20,000 feet, the B-25 pilot reconfirmed their location with the controller, who affirmed they were now directly above Otner Airport. Following this directive, the pilot signaled for the 18 skydivers to jump. This inadvertent error, which would imperil the skydivers, had occurred unbeknownst to anyone at that moment. The frigid temperature of -30 degrees Celsius prompted all the skydivers to layer extra jumpsuits for warmth. When they collectively exited the B-25, they aimed to form a cohesive formation during the freefall. As they descended, they encountered a thick layer of clouds below and planned to deploy their parachutes once they passed through it. Their exhilaration during the freefall suddenly turned to trepidation upon breaching the dense clouds. Instead of seeing land beneath them, they were met with the vast expanse of Lake Erie's deep waters when they reached around 3,000 feet in altitude. Swiftly activating their parachutes, they aimed to land near the lake's edge. Unfortunately, they missed, touching down at least 10 kilometers away from the shoreline. Their expectation of immediately getting out of their harnesses and awaiting assistance didn't align with the reality they faced upon landing. The thick layers of warm clothing they had on made it impossible for most of them to swim. Only 2 divers had the foresight to remove their shoes and extra weight before landing. These 2 were the only ones able to swim for a while and were eventually rescued. Sadly, the remaining 16 divers couldn't survive. Their bodies remained unseen for several days, with one recovered a week later. This incident made headlines worldwide, prompting the formation of an investigation team to determine where the B-25 dropped them and who was responsible. The air traffic controller mentioned that when the B-25 released the Skydivers, they were at Otnar Airport, around 10 kilometers from Lake Erie. They suggested that the Skydivers might have drifted due to strong winds, reaching Lake Erie. This scenario implies a total drift of 20 kilometers, from Otnar Airport to Lake Erie, and then another 10 kilometers into the lake. However, if we consider the air traffic controller's explanation, it means that the Skydivers were carried a total distance of 20 kilometers. Experts estimated the airspeed and dive height that day and concluded that the divers could potentially drift for at least 5 kilometers. ATC made a mistake in their statement. They claimed a location, but the B-25 and Cessna pilots disagreed, saying it was wrong. The investigation found that there was a shift change in controllers when both pilots asked ATC for their location. Surprisingly, the B-25 was actually at Cessna's location, not Otnar Airport. The B-25 was at Lake Erie while being told it was at Otnar. Additionally, both divers and pilots broke aviation laws by jumping without confirming their target. For the following 2 years, other skydivers used floating gear and aimed to land in the lake area. In 1972, the court blamed the Federal Aviation Authority for the deaths of the 16 divers. The B-25 pilot's license was permanently suspended. Additionally, skydivers were mandated to jump at least 50 kilometers away from any water. I hope you like, subscribe, and share this video of Docutainment. Thank you so much for your kind comments. See you in the next awesome video.